Thank you very much, Neelu, for that very kind introduction. Our guests who have come all the way from Washington, D.C., members of the industry, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you. Neelu was right to say that we are at not just an inflection point, but at a tremendous tectonic change in what's happening with aviation in India. Now, in my own professional career, I've been very fortunate to have lived through the development of the IT services and BPO industry in India. In fact, I was on the McKinsey team and I was co-leading the team that actually wrote the first NASSCOM McKinsey report on the size of the IT services industry then. And we came up with a target where we said that the IT services industry would be a $50 billion industry. And ladies and gentlemen, that was in 1999. Is when we said that it would be a $50 billion industry, and we were widely ridiculed for coming up with that extravagant a number. But it actually was an aspiration that really galvanized the entire ecosystem. It was a number that made a big difference to the government at that time. And we were able to therefore establish a roadmap and begin a process of really building up that entire ecosystem and making the IT services industry the crown jewel of India's economy. Now, there's another very interesting aspect of the growth of that industry. And that very interesting aspect is that it is, in fact, till even today, an extraordinary partnership between India and the US. And it was that partnership, the tremendous trade and people linkages that got established through the IT services industry that resulted in a wonderful outcome for the United States in terms of far more productive use of software, much lower cost software, and of course for India, it really has been the industry that's driven and propelled India's economic growth. So today the industry is contributing about $125 billion to the Indian economy, and it has created 4.25 million jobs in India. So the target that we set of $50 billion was soon surpassed. We got to $125 billion, which is where we are today. And it's created 4.25 million jobs. That's been very, very important and very, very transformational for India's economy as well. Because apart from all those white-collar jobs, apart from the growth in GDP, we also fundamentally changed India's balance of payments position because of the export earnings of this very important industry, and also because of the remittances of our IT service professionals who were outside the country. So the combination of the export earnings plus the remittances of the folks on H-1B visas, yes, has made all the difference to our balance of payments also. So this is an industry that has really taken India forward, and it is a wonderful example of the kind of partnership that's possible between India and the US. And friends, I'm telling you the story about India's IT services and BPO industry, and telling you about my own personal role in it, because I was there right from the time it got started. In fact, I was there even earlier because as an engineer who finished IIT in 1985 and then went to the United States to do my master's at the University of Pennsylvania, we were right next to Bala Kinwood, which is where Tata Unisys really got started. And I had a lot of friends who were then working for Tata Unisys. And we were there back in the 80s when this whole industry even began. So I've really been able to see that industry right from the point from when it was a $5 or $10 million industry to the point where it is now a $125 billion industry. Now I'm telling you this story and I'm telling you my personal involvement because I think we now at the cusp of another industry getting to the same size and the same impact. And that's the aviation industry. And what's possible as far as aviation is concerned, in terms of size, in terms of forging a tremendous partnership between India and the US, I think is also extraordinary. And like we put out the number of $50 billion, and now of course we're at $125 billion, as to what this industry can do, I think it's important at this point to set an aspirational number and really go for that. So the number that I have been talking about is the number of 1 billion trips. 1 billion trips. Today and this fiscal year, I think we'll do close to 200 million trips, which puts us after the US and China as the third largest domestic aviation market in the world. Not necessarily the largest, because obviously the UK has Heathrow. But at 200 million trips, if we just grow at 8 or 9 or 10% for the next 15 or 20 years, we'll double and then we'll quadruple and we'll get close to a billion. And by the way, the long-term growth rate for passenger volumes in India over the last 15 or 20 years has been 12%. Has been 12%. And in fact, I just pulled out a report that was put out by the Planning Commission in 2012, and they said in that the long-term growth rate of Indian aviation has been 12%. We think by fiscal 17 it will be 200 million trips. And lo and behold, we are at 200 million trips. That's what happened in 2012. So this is no mystery. This is not something that is hidden to us. It's very clear that this is what is happening. And if you see the value proposition, the impact that aviation has on economies, on people, on societies, it's a given that we will continue to grow like that. I was just in Srinagar this morning, and I can tell you for the valley, aviation airlines are the golden bridge by which it's connected back to the rest of India. And so this is so vitally important for our country that we build up aviation, that we in fact get to those billion trips. So that's the target, friends, that we should be thinking about, 1 billion trips. And then what we should ask ourselves, and I think you all are really the leaders of this, which is, how do we get there? Now, whether we get there in 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, 13, 14 years, frankly, is something that you will decide. Because the more capacity we add, the better the supply side is, the safer it is, the more secure it is, the faster the growth will be. And so it's really in your hands, and for us as supporting you, of course, as to how we'll realize the potential. But it's very clear, I think, to all of us that the potential is there. And we just have to look at a US at 900 million trips, or look at a China at 500, 600 million trips to recognize that if we just follow along in their path, we will get to 1 billion trips as well. And what's amazing, and I love this part, as an engineer, I'm really enjoying working in this industry, is that if you look at what's happening on the technology side, and whether it is in terms of, just more composites being used on fuselage, whether it is the efficiency of current jet engines, whether it's electric propulsion, you look at all the different things that are happening as far as technology is concerned, you just have to have more confidence about where this industry is going to be in terms of cost per kilometer. Those costs per kilometer are continuing to come down, and it stuns people. It absolutely stuns people when I tell them that the cost of travel on a narrow body today is 4 rupees per kilometer. 4 rupees per kilometer. And that's the price of an auto rickshaw today. So we are at 4 rupees, 5 rupees per kilometer, and it is absolutely incredible how much more is possible in terms of further cost reduction as far as this technology is concerned. And that just gives us more confidence that we will in fact realize the 1 billion trips. And if we realize the 1 billion trips, of course, this, all the good things as far as cargo, logistics, all those things will also happen. So that's really what's ahead of us, is to really build the supply, really build the capacity so we can realize the potential of 1 billion trips. And it's not over then, folks. It just keeps on going from there. The US is still growing at 900 million passenger trips on 330 million people, is still growing in volume terms 3 or 4%. So it'll continue on from there. But the steep part of the S curve, I think, will largely be realized when you get to somewhere in the region of 1 billion trips. Unless we do really, really well in terms of GDP per capita, and then we don't have 300, 400 million people who can afford flying, but it is 1 billion people who can afford flying. Then why couldn't we have 2, 3, 4 billion trips a year? Except those trips will be on drones and things like that at that point. So that's the second part of what I wanted to talk about, which is that as we go forward and build this capacity, we also have to imagine a future. We also have to imagine profound changes to the way in which people travel. Because we are not going to just be flying in an aluminum tube 30,000 feet in the sky. We are also going to be utilizing passenger drones. We'll be utilizing, 6-seaters, 8-seaters, helicopters of various kinds. There will be a wide variety of flying devices out there, a wide variety of flying devices, opening up airports, opening up ways of travel that we cannot even think about right now. And that is the future we have to put together. And I really want to compliment everything that's been done by all of you over the last 10 years, because you've really made aviation happen in India. But I'll conclude by saying that we have to imagine and build a future of aviation in this country that is profoundly different from what we have right now. That will imply that we have a variety of flying vehicles, whether it's passenger drones, whether it is helicopters, whether it's smaller planes, larger planes, electric planes. There's going to be a range of devices if I just look at the technology that's out there. But we also then have to build our digital capabilities. We have to have this idea of a digital sky, because if we're going to have all of those many flying vehicles in the sky, we're going to have to manage all of that safely. And that requires vast digitization, massive big data capability, very sophisticated algorithms. The Intel folks were showing me 300 drones in a swarm working together. How do we do that not on little drones but on large drones, so that we can really have a way of dealing with the traffic and the congestion issues in our cities? We solve that by going vertical. But we need the digital sky concept. We need a way to automate it and do it through algorithms so that we can really facilitate all of that. The demand is there. It's a question for us of technology and business models to make it work. So that's the second thing I want you all to think about. And then the third thing, and I'll conclude with this, is we have to invent these solutions. We have to do the research. We have to build the research institutes. We have to build the capabilities where we can work on these very tough engineering problems. They are fun problems. As an engineer, I almost feel like, wow, I wish I could go back 25, 30 years and really start working on these problems, because they are really fun problems. But we need to create the spaces, we need to create the institutions, we need to create the universities where we can get India's best minds, India's smartest people, and start to have them work on these kinds of problems. And we have to build those institutions, that research capability, and this is where I think India and the US can forge such a unique partnership. Because the problems we're going to try and solve, the air rickshaw problems we're going to try and solve in India, are going to be India's problems. They're not going to be the US's problems. The US is at a different design point. The India design point is 80% of the functionality at 20% of the price. So it's a totally different functionality, it's a totally different design point. But we need the technology, we need the expertise, we need the people that you have in the US. And we need to work together. We need to work together to reinvent and rethink and reimagine what aerospace is going to look like over the next 20, 30 years. And I think that's the basis for not just the next 10 years of this program, for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and I'm sure you all will make it very, very successful. My best wishes for all of you. Thank you so much.